Worry for the Bruins. Side up by Ecclestone and Berenson. Westfall rolled in front. Sanderson tried a shot that was wide and Keenan cleared it but not out. Bobby Orr behind the net to Sanderson. Orr! Bobby Orr! Scores for the Boston Bruins! Have won the Stanley Cup! That's the Stanley
This marathon, as are the goaltenders, Kirk McLean to our right at the north goal. Felix Potvin to our left, and the Leafs get the draw to start the second overtime, but it's turned over at center ice. Linden carries the puck into the Toronto zone, turning off the left boards. Back at the line to Babbage. Long shot. Potvin had trouble with it. Adams did score! Greg Adams! Greg Adams! Adams gets the winner! 14 seconds into the second overtime. The Vancouver Canucks are going to the Stanley Cup final.
Here's Henrik Sedin centering for Daniel Couture. Got a piece of that. Daniel to Bieksa. Takes the shot. Blocked by Huskins. Burrows is fresh. Knocked the puck loose to Edler. Back in for Alex Burrows. It's up in the air. Score! It hits the stanchion, comes right back, but watch it. Nobody's looking at where it is. A knuckle puck that goes right inside the post. You're right. Look at the body language. Nobody knows where the puck is except the Exa. Even this.
It's a week of historic proportions in many ways. Welcome to the hockey edition of Agree or Disagree, the podcast. I'm Kevin Olenek. You can follow all things I do at KVOLE on Twitter, KevinOlenek.com, and subscribe to the podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me as always is Sean Holmes-Smith. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. We're a little later, but it's kind of okay. I got a little bit extra rest today, so I felt good about that. Thank you, Sean, for allowing more rest. and Tyler, how are you? Tyler Noble?
I'm doing well, thanks, Kevin. Another beautiful day in northern BC paradise.
Yes, it's always beautiful out in BC. Raining here, but it's a week of. There was an anniversary this week, the Greg Adams goal that allowed double overtime that allowed the Vancouver Canucks to advance to the Stanley Cup final in 1994 against the New York Rangers, and Kevin Bieksa's off the stanchion overtime goal against the San Jose Sharks that allowed them to advance to the Stanley Cup final in 2011. Do you guys have some quick recollections of those two moments?
Oh, for sure. The Jim Robson call just gives me goosebumps every time. I mean, just the way he called it, just so simple. Greg Adams, and subsequent to that, we've heard other announcers kind of imitate the way that Jim Robson says Stanley Cup final in the clip, and Jim Hughes did the same thing on the Bieksa goal there in 2011.
That's true, actually. I never really noticed that until you mentioned it, but you're right. Mm-hmm. There's a very parallel way of doing that. Sean, what do you remember?
I was a bit young for the Greg Adams goal, but reliving it all the time it's quite the iconic call and goal. And then the Bieksa one was just such a weird goal, weird bounce that you just you can't help but sort of laugh at it. Yeah. I mean, the Bieksa goal. I mean, I remember watching that night. Obviously, I had a few pops there, and I mean, I had no clue. I just all of a sudden, like, everybody's celebrating. I see the puck bouncing out from the front of the net. Like I couldn't understand what happened. Like, was it actually in? Like, there was all this confusion, and then on the replay, it was so clear. And just man, when things are going your way, I mean, talk about a bounce.
Yeah, and they, really after when Burrows slayed the dragon, to quote John Shorthouse, it really felt like they got some bounces their way. into the Stanley Cup final, Nashville and San Jose. And not that they weren't deserved, that's not what I'm saying, but they were able to get some bounces. And you do need to get a little bit of a break here and there to get to the Stanley Cup final, no question. So,
quick little side note on the stanchion there. Back in my Vancouver days, 2008 to 2010, I worked part-time at the arena there doing conversions. And at that part of the boards had at the time, I guess a device that could like change the ads. So like it was built into the boards and it would rotate different ads. And one of the stanchions there was a stiffer stanchion in the boards. And I don't know if the puck hit the stiffer stanchion, but there was an odd stanchion in that part of the rink. It didn't have as much flexibility. It didn't react like the rest of them, where with the plexiglass, there's a lot of give in it. So that's always been a bit of a chuckle for me. Is like, did it hit that weird stanchion?
Do you think BXA knew about it?
What's that?
Did BXA know about that stanchion?
Oh, probably not. I don't know how much the players would notice things like that.
He seems like a pretty crafty guy that he might notice something like that sometimes.
Yeah.
But, it's certainly been an interesting weekend. And, of course, the historic moment where none of us were alive for was Bobby Orr's diving, probably one of the greatest goal that will has ever been scored, in my opinion. But we will talk about the Stanley Cup final and the first NHL game in 942 years a little bit later in the podcast. But Eric Francis has the ability to stir the pot in Calgary Flames Nation. At times, some people find him insightful. Others find him completely irritating. But he wrote an article today that's out on Sportsnet about the idea that the Vancouver Canucks should make an offer to Sam Bennett. His argument basically being that the Flames are going to be pretty much near the cap. They have to sign 2 goalies. They will have to re-up Matthew Tkachuk. They'll probably have to re-up Andrew Mangiapane. They've got a lot of work to do that you could, quote-unquote, overpay for a Sam Bennett enough for them to consider making an offer sheet to at least, if not acquire Sam Bennett in a possible way, cash-strap the Calgary Flames. So I guess the first question is let's imagine for a moment that the Flames have decided that that the offer that the Vancouver Canucks did was not enough. Or was too much. I'm just like, forget it. We're not going to do it. Congratulations, Sam Bennett. You are now a member of the Vancouver Canucks. Are you okay with that?
Well, I think it comes down to how much you're offering and how much the compensation back to the Flames is. You look at if you look at the compensation up until about just over $3.6 million, it's just a second round pick. So if you basically max out that level of compensation, and you've got Sam Bennett to 2-3 years at $3.6 million, and you basically give up a second round pick, I think that's very fair and something that'd be a good gamble for the Canucks, because he's basically what they want Jake Virtanen to be.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. I mean, for $3.6-ish million and a second round draft pick, that doesn't sound too outrageous, right? I mean, it is overpaying because it's not just the money, but also a draft pick. But still, you could see that making some sense. I mean, for Eric Francis in his article there, trying to play the angle of one team sticking it to another. I mean, I'm not as sold on whether a team is motivated in that regard, but the idea of trying to say, okay, look, there's a team that's cap strapped. We could use that player. Let's see if we can get a deal done. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's not Mitch Marner in the sense that you're going to have to give up 4 first-round draft picks for him, which it is a lot. It's and it's not much financially, as you guys mentioned, and he's a guy that I think can be a really valuable piece for the Vancouver Canucks. So I wouldn't be surprised if they offer him, but I also don't. Like, I guess looking at this from the Flames' perspective, I don't see why unless Sam Bennett is coming to the table asking for $7 million, I don't see how the Flames wouldn't match that either. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't.
Yeah. I mean, teams go to great lengths to match offers to avoid getting. I mean, we saw that with Nashville, right? With Shea Weber, there was the offer sheet that can't remember from which team, but they did match, and that was one where I wondered if they would.
The whole offer sheet system in NHL and how the GMs treat it is flawed and underused. I think there's too much worry from each GM and team that there'll be retaliation for what they did. We saw it a little bit back when Mike Gillis was the Canucks GM, because they offer sheeted David Backes, and then St. Louis retaliated by offer sheeting Steve Bernier, and that whole issue. But it's been a while since we've seen one, and I think there's only been like 1 or 2 that haven't been matched. And that's just something that I think it'll take someone who's out of the old hockey boys club to do it.
Yeah,
because they're too afraid to ruffle feathers. So this is a great idea, but I don't think it's going to be something realistic, because of Benning being part and Trillivan both being part of the old boys club.
Well, let me throw a different scenario out to you here. If you really wanted to stick it to the Flames, the offer sheet that I would be doing is Matthew Tkachuk, because he is going to be a tough sign. Eric Francis did write another article earlier this week suggesting that the Matthew Tkachuk camp is going to be looking for 5 years, and it's quite likely at that point that he's a UFA. So if you really wanted to stick it to the Calgary Flames, you would toss a pretty sweet offer sheet at Matthew Tkachuk, I would think. Would you not?
I think that's just the worry is that, do you really want to do it just in case they don't match it? You're giving up a lot of picks, and you've got a very expensive forward now on you've spent a lot of money and assets to get.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot more of a difficult move to actually make. Whereas Bennett, you could see the Flames treating him as more expendable, and like Calgary would be even harder on the whole match thing, even if they got to rejig the whole salary structure with the other forwards to some extent. I mean, they would be much more motivated to match any offer for Matthew Tkachuk, whereas with Bennett, they probably would be willing to say, okay, see you later.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just in terms of if you wanted to play the stick and game, I would think it would be easier to do it, or not easier, but it would be a deeper impact on Tkachuk than Bennett.
For sure.
I don't know. I'm hoping this year, in some way, shape, or form, there is an attempt to do an offer sheet. I'm not anti-elite. If I was the Islanders, as an example, and if I was Lou Lamoriello, I know that he's as old school gets. But I would, after the Tavares signing, if you're going to play the vindictive game, put a match offer for Mitch Martin. I hope it happens, because I do think that kind of creates a little bit of friction and it creates something very interesting. I don't know. I think I agree with you, Sean. I think it's underused. I think that there's really good opportunities there for some really interesting things to happen strategically. And hopefully there's someone innovative enough that does do it. I hope it does happen. Is it going to happen? I'm 20% certain that's a possibility, but I'm not entirely convinced. But I think it would create some interesting discussion and some interesting ideas. I don't know.
I think I love the idea of it because it gives another tool for a GM to try and get a younger player, because especially with the game trending to younger, faster players, the age of the unrestricted free agent making a major change for your change of fortune for your organization and team is a little bit past what it used to be. Because unless you're getting someone who was like a John Tavares who came right out of junior, played as an 18-year-old, and planned for this to be a UFA at early as possible, you're getting 27, 28-year-old, 29-year-old free agents who are more likely on the down slope of their career than in the prime.
Right. Yeah. I'm just pulling up here slowly but surely just some names for, we know the Canucks, the Mariners, we know some of the bigger names, but I'm curious in terms of defense, some names that could be an interesting idea for the Vancouver Canucks to at least look at offer sheeting, and my computer is being slow. But do you guys have any in mind that while I computer from moves here slow here?
Oh, well, I mean, I would hope that the Canucks don't go crazy on free agency. I mean, if they...
I meant restricted free agent, not unrestricted free agent. Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard with restricted free agency, as we've been discussing here. I don't know. I haven't put much thought into restricted free agents they might want to target, but just as a general comment on free agency, I mean, the Canucks have been under fire every offseason, it seems like, in the Jim Benning era for being too busy in free agency. So I don't know.
Yeah, and there's gonna,
but that's the thing, is because it's not necessarily been too busy in free agency under Jim Benning. It's been, they haven't found anyone who's really helped them in free agency, and they've overpaid to get them. You got Louis Eriksson at $6 million. You've got, and then last year with Roussel and Jay Beagle getting longer term contracts and higher cap hits than you would really want from bottom six players, despite how good Roussel was until the injury. So it's just one of those. That's the problem with UFA right now, is that you have to be very selective and you have to get a little bit lucky that whoever you sign turns out and matches the quality of contract that you've given them.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's one. I'll toss a name out that if I'm the Canucks, and I'm innovative, I might toss an offer sheet to Charlie McAvoy. 21 years old. His cap hit last year was $916,667. No arbitration rights. He did turn down a pretty long-term offer already. I don't know. That's a guy, a right-hand shot, 21 years old. I think he would absolutely, 1,000% be a guy that would fit the Canucks. And there's Jacob Trouba, another option maybe. I would rather have McAvoy over Trouba, to be honest with you. But there's a couple of options there. You're right in terms of. It's going to be interesting in terms of July 1st what the unrestricted free agent strategy is going to be. So I don't know, Jordan Binnington. I'm not saying that the Canucks should be going after Jordan Binnington, by the way, but Jordan Binnington is an RFA and he is going to get paid for sure. So there's Zach Werenski. There is some interesting people out there that, you know, if I am the Canucks, I at least have the discussion whether or not you want to try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You're no worse off. But there is some names out there. So I don't know. I think that'll be
that McAvoy one is certainly very intriguing. Trouba as well. I mean, we've seen with the Canucks how badly they could use some more defensemen.
Yeah, I think the way I would approach it is I would approach the team and say, look, we're very interested in Jacob Trouba, and we'd like to discuss a trade here that maybe can help you more immediately than just draft picks, because if we can't, we're still interested in offer sheeting him for this much. And you work that to find a way to basically get more of a hockey, quote unquote hockey deal versus just 3-4 first round picks for Jacob Trouba type deal or Charlie McAvoy, because then I think it's a better use of assets, and you're also helping, say, Winnipeg stay a little more competitive short term when their window is now.
Yeah, and important to remember, Trouba and the Jets, I mean, they've had a bit of friction over contracts in the past, as I understand here. I'm just reading here, Ken Weep from the Winnipeg Sun, he contributes to TSN's Winnipeg Jets coverage, is speculating that Trouba could be on the move. So, that's one the Canucks should definitely inquire on.
Yeah. I mean, if PK Subban doesn't work out, which we talked about last week, there's ideas out there at the very least about some names out there. And again, we also talked about how Benny needs to make a splash. I think that is a way to make a splash, and there is a possibility of some trades. I think that some more interesting trades too, if you at least do what I think what Sean is saying, and it's like, okay, maybe not draft picks, but we got some players that we could look at making an exchange for that. I mean, not only the Canucks, I think NHL teams can do, but I think the Canucks, this is an option I think the Canucks can play with a little bit here.
As far as making a trade for Trouba, the Jets don't have a first-round draft pick coming up this draft, so they'd really be looking for that to come back the other way, and I don't know if the Canucks can afford to do that.
You wouldn't give up the 10th for Trouba is too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that Canucks would be comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
I'd do it for Charlie McAvoy.
I would absolutely do it for Charlie. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
And another player that I think, looking at the list of restricted free agent defenseman that I think the Canucks should look at is Ryan Murray out of Columbus. I think he's good. I think depending on what Columbus does, he could be someone that could get shipped out for help up front with them potentially losing Panarin, Duchesne, Zingle. So I think that's someone that I would look at for the Canucks to help rebuild and rejig this blue line that desperately needs it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Oilers in a little bit. The other thing that I think is going to be interesting, because the thing I think is, and we talked about probably a little bit about this last week, and if they're, and looks like they're going with Tippett, they are going to have to improve that defense too in Edmonton. So that's something I think that a competitor, a rival is thinking the same way. You probably will have to be a little bit more innovative for sure. What is not innovative, to move on a little bit here, is, of course, the draft is in Vancouver. We've talked a lot about that in terms of the hype, in terms of Jim Benning and Vancouver needing to do something spectacular because it is here in Vancouver. So tickets went on sale from Ticketmaster on Thursday, and apparently, from what I could figure out, there were only 2 to 3 tickets available because for some unknown reason, they're sold out all of a sudden. It's fascinating to me just because from my personal perspective here, there was the announcement of the Botch tribute on Wednesday. I had no problem getting a ticket for that. As soon as that was announced, I went on Ticketmaster, I grabbed my ticket, and hunky-dory. Everything was fine. But I understand that the Botch tribute and the Vancouver Canucks draft are 2 completely different things. I get that. But it's just, I can't believe how poorly this was promoted by the Canucks. They didn't really promote this draft. Tickets available, not really, I didn't think effectively. And I can't understand how these things sell out so quickly. Like, it's a topic for another, well, maybe it's a topic for now because in terms of concerts this happens too, but this whole thing, how this was handled, in my opinion, and Tyler, I'm sure will have some things to say, this was messed up.
Yeah, so I tried to purchase a couple of tickets on Thursday. Now, just a note, you mentioned they went on sale Thursday. The general public on sale was Thursday morning. They did offer tickets as a pre-sale to season ticket holders and pack holders as well. And so a lot of the tickets went during that part of the ticket sale strategy, I guess you could say. So there was very slim pickings, even when 10 a.m. Arrived and you were able to potentially get tickets. But I don't know, it's very surprising. Ticketmaster is, they've been around forever and have been, they're a world leader in ticket sales and selling tickets to events, and it just didn't work. I mean, I was having the same frustration that seemingly lots of people were having based on what I saw on Twitter. And you'd get in the queue, you'd see the map, you'd pick a couple of seats, and then they would tell you that somebody else has already gotten them. And this is like, as soon as the map appears, I mean, within like 6 seconds, I've got the seat selected and I hit the submit button, and then it says that they're gone, and went around and around for about, I'd say, a good half hour. And then that was it. There were no more seats.
Yeah, that's it's shocking. And then what's weird is you can go on StubHub or you can go on your favorite ticket other place at 11:10, and these tickets that are just been bought are on sale for twice as much as you had to pay for.
Oh, in some cases, 10 times the face value. Like the face value was $27. And like there were tickets on sale for around $260, $270.
That's crazy. Like that's just crazy to me how that can happen. I mean, I guess I don't even understand the ability of how one can actually buy a ticket and then sell it for 10 times, 10 times more. I mean, I guess I kind of understand that ethically, but the skill to do that is quite impressive, I guess. It was quite something. But it just feels like the average person that just wants to go to this event gets screwed out of going. And I know that there were people that got tickets there, but I feel like the most diehard of Canuck fans have gotten kind of screwed out of this. And it's frustrating to me.
Yeah, especially because, they offered up most of the tickets in advance to season ticket holders. And you'd say, okay, well, if the season ticket holders or the pack holders are supposedly the most invested fans and they should have first dibs and this and that. But I mean, seeing all these tickets on the secondary resale websites, it indicates to me that the season ticket holders aren't that interested in the draft.
Yeah.
And now, yeah, like you say, Kevin, the average person that doesn't want to pay through the nose and just wants to go and see the draft the one time it's in Vancouver, I mean, it's just not going to be realistic now for people.
And I imagine that both Sportsnet and TSN will probably have tickets available for like contests or whatever, but that's going to be a heck of a fun time fighting everyone for that. It's just it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think the Canucks did announce on Thursday that some more tickets will be released closer to the draft. I guess there is a little bit of uncertainty on the layout of the building. Like it's like a concert setup with an end stage, so there's quite a bit of seating in the building that's not available. But depending on the final layout, they may have some more seats, and I think it's pretty common, especially like with like in the Stanley Cup final, for example. Like there's a lot of tickets that are held and not put on sale until closer to the event. So we'll see something like that probably as well.
Yeah. I'm just reading Rob Williams in column in the Daily Hive, and some of the tweets here. Like, what a joke. I have 8 windows open and just keep getting someone else's bought your seats. It's, on right at 10 and couldn't get a ticket. It's crazy. Like, and I mean, tickets for the first round were only $27.20, and for Saturday it's $11.50. But like now you're looking at getting like, and we just confirmed before we got on here, it's like $230 Canadian to get a ticket to go to the draft, and I can't imagine many people feeling that's a great idea, but
Well, I don't know. We'll let Sean comment on here in a second, but I think the Canucks just badly underestimated the demand for this. Like they could have set the price a lot higher or done some kind of structured pricing, which would have maybe slowed the demand down a little bit.
Well, that, and I think they need to think about having some sort of party outside to help the demand there too, because I think there's just this is a bigger issue than just the NHL draft or anything like that. Because anytime there's any sort of major event that needs tickets like this, it's shocking how quickly they sell out, and I think we need Ticketmaster and those companies need to figure out a way to make it more user friendly, because otherwise a lot of it's luck. You gotta get on. You gotta be on like exactly at the time the tickets get released. You can't be a second late. You have to have you have to somehow have a faster internet connection than someone else. So anytime people have have a shared internet or anything like that, they're going to get screwed because they don't have a direct access to whatever the domain is, and you're finding ways to make it tough for people to get tickets and to anger your fan base.
And
I think there's a couple ways I would have changed it. I would have had only a lesser amount of tickets available for your seat ticket holders and your pack holders and all that, and then I would have found a way to release it in stages or something like that. And then they need to find a way to get these scalpers and stuff out of the system somehow. I'm not smart enough to know how to do that, but there has to be some sort of way to do it so that you don't end up with the amount of tickets that are available immediately after the fact, and they're 10 times as much as the ticket.
Yeah. I remember back, like for the Ticketmaster pack, I remember back when the Tragically Hip were doing their final tour with Gord Downie, and this was such a huge issue. Like it angered a lot of people that were legitimate that wanted to see the Tragically Hip for Gord Downie for the final time, and then the same thing was happening, and that people were scalping again. And I remember a radio DJ in Ontario actually called one of them. I guess he kind of said, "Hey, meet me. Like, oh, I'm in this town. You're in this town. Let's meet in the middle." And he actually didn't show up, and just really pissed the scalper guy off. But and he actually put it on air. But I think one of the things that is concerning me and a little frustrating me specifically about this is my fear is, once the Vancouver Canucks pick 10th, I think a lot of people will be leaving.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think there'd be a good portion of people that aren't that interested anymore, or maybe they'll wait around for some of the other Canadian teams or original 6 teams to pick, and then I think you might see some people start to lose interest after the Canucks make their pick.
Yeah, and that part to me kind of is a bit frustrating. I mean, if you pay your money, you get to do what you want, but that's the other disservice of this too. Is like, you're going to be leaving. The chances are you're leaving after the 10th pick, and you're kind of screwing it for people that really want to sit there and actually and want to enjoy the event. So I think that there's some bigger issues here. Hopefully the Canucks can figure it out going forward, but really unfortunate what kind of happened there. But hopefully, yeah, as I said, hopefully going forward, something will change there. And I think that they should have a draft party. I think there's a couple of, like, the Pint can do it. The Library House can do it. There's a couple of places that could do some really interesting things there too. And maybe the Canucks realized, hopefully, with this, is that, hey, there is an opportunity to do something kind of cool and innovative. And there was also talk. Someone suggested the idea of maybe having something at BC Place. I don't know what you guys think of that. I know that it's not owned by the Aquilinis, but I don't know what you think about the idea of having some sort of event at BC Place.
I don't know if it's available.
That's probably another issue, but I think what we're seeing is that if the draft is in a Canadian city or a hockey market, you should find a way to get more people involved. And if that's a bigger venue like BC Place, then that's something that should be at least looked at.
Maybe they'll have a draft party there or something. Who knows?
I see they have a Whitecaps game on Saturday the 22nd, but the Friday night looks like there's nothing. Just a quick look.
I could make a smart-ass joke at the Whitecaps, actually, considering the amount of people have been going to Whitecaps games. You still could do the draft at BC Place.
Kevin?
That was not nice, was it?
Be nice.
I'm just saying.
I mean, I guess they would reply, well, what about a Lions game?
That's true, too. That's very fair. That's a fair comment as well. I'm not saying that that's not. But I mean, obviously you're not going, if there's a Whitecaps game, you're not going to have the draft there, but it's that's a future conversation of how the Lions and the Whitecaps can engage them. Well, the Whitecaps aren't engaging there. I think there's different reasons why these two markets aren't engaging their market, and one of them is a complete and utter PR disaster that we don't have time to get into on this one. But the Lions, I think that's a different issue as well. But there's certainly opportunity. I guess the point is there's opportunities here for the Canucks to do something really good here, and hopefully that comes through as well. Mm-hmm. So I guess we've talked for however long here. We've talked for 40 minutes and we haven't gotten into the Stanley Cup final. I guess we might as well before we get into a couple of things here, we should talk about the Stanley Cup final here. It's been 942 days since a playoff game has been played. But Monday is starting the game one of the Cup final between the Bruins and the Blues. I guess my question is how excited are you for the Stanley Cup final? Maybe I'll put it this way. If there's a Game 7 between the Bucks and the Raptors and the Bruins and the Blues on Game 1, what are you watching?
I'm watching basketball. Yeah.
Okay, say it again.
I'd watch the Stanley Cup final. I'm not a basketball fan, so as much as exciting as a Game 7 could be, I'd be more focused on the hockey.
I think the rarity of the Raptors being where they are, I'd be more interested in the basketball. But generally, yeah, I mean, I'm way more of a hockey fan than a basketball fan. There won't be any overlap during the 2 championship series. The both leagues schedule that, so there isn't conflict. But I mean, the Bruins and the Blues, Boston, I guess, not a big surprise to see them there, especially once Tampa was knocked out. The Blues definitely, to me, very interesting that they've been able to get back to the finals finally and have a really decent shot at it. But it's a couple of U.S. markets, and it's in June, and there's other things going on.
Yeah, I think that there's some really interesting things for the pure hockey fan to watch here because these are 2 really unique teams. I think the Blues are a great story considering what happened at the start of the year. But I'm not feeling, and maybe it's because we've been sort of inundated with the Raptor here in Canada with the Raptor fever or the Raptor playoff run. There's not been a lot of excitement to this, and I think it also the part of the problem though with that is the length of time between the semifinals and the final. I mean, and the NHL just hasn't done a lot to really hype this. Although in Boston they had that one scrimmage and 18,000 people showed up, so I think in Boston they're certainly excited. I think in St. Louis they are certainly excited. I'll be interested to see what the U.S. market numbers are, but I don't in terms of national recognition and national excitement for this. I'm not getting the feel for that, unfortunately.
Having the such a long break isn't great to try and to build that, unfortunately, but. Yeah, it's always tough with unless you've got a local team in the final to build up a very good national or any sort of excitement for the finals. So it's a bit of you have that attrition factor where you just round 1 of the playoffs is great because you got so much hockey and not enough time to watch it.
Yeah,
and then it's so late. It's June, and you're watching hockey, right? So so people have so many other things they would much rather be doing out when it's nice out.
Yeah, for sure. It's the season is too long.
Yeah, and the other thing, you just spitballing here, you look at. When minor hockey season ends, just before the playoffs, so that the kids aren't necessarily playing their sports anymore, their winter sport anymore, and then there's usually a 2-3 week break between the seasons, and then they'll start up their spring sport that covers the first round, and then now they're in the middle of wrapping up to the end of their spring sports season, right? So people find other ways to spend their time other than watching hockey on TV.
Yeah, they've certainly got to find a way to shorten it or condense it in some way, shape, or form for the benefit of the game, and it's a really long that series is that's going to end if it goes 7 games, which we'll quickly talk about here in a second. That's 2 weeks. They got to find a way to shorten that out. It's because it gets so hard, But
I don't know. The league's doubled down on it. They've been very clear. They like this format. I think they one of the things is they really want, and I don't know where the PA stands on this, but they really want the players to be fresh going, in the Stanley Cup final as much as they can be. So the time off in advance certainly is rest for both teams. Especially if you don't have it, if you don't have a little bit of separation there, then, if one team like Boston gets the sweep and then the other team has to go 6 or 7, then you have this, there's a big difference there. And I mean, you could say, well, that's a competitive advantage. We got our third round series done sooner. We deserve the rest. That should be an advantage for us. But I think the league wants 2 fairly fresh teams going into it, and then they don't want it to be too hectic with the travel demands and everything as well.
That's fair. It's after 11, like when you're not really talking about it, it's not at forefront of your mind, like what the NFL, like really compare the Bruins with the Bruins have basically had the same amount of time off as the Patriots did between the Super Bowl. Like, and if you're not talking about it and it's not forefront in your mind, it's hard to remember that it's coming up, right? That's where I think you're losing people. I understand in terms of freshness of players, but in terms of the promotion of the actual game, it's lost on there. But do you have a pick? Are you do you have a sense of how this series is going to go?
I think the easy pick would be Boston. They've been there before. They've been there before. They understand how tired and all that you're going to be during the playoffs and during this time. But I honestly think that it's St. Louis's year. I like their depth. I think they've got more depth up front than Boston. And I just the way that Jordan Binnington's playing, it's just he's lights out, and he's only shown emotion like once this whole playoffs. So I think it's I like them in 6.
I think if Binnington can outplay Rask, then I like the Blues' chances. But I'm always one that errs on the side of experience. Boston's got so much of it. They've gone through these playoffs fairly efficiently. They had 7 games against Toronto, but they're coming into this with a little more rest. They have some older players that could use the rest if they are going into this, healthy and not too banged up. Depth-wise, Boston's got lots of it too. So I don't know. I'm still going to probably lean on the side of Boston. I'd say in 6 games.
Yeah, I'm kind of Boston in 6 games too. I do like where St. Louis. I think that I will say I feel like the best defenseman in this series is Colton Parayko, and if they can stop that Bergeron, Pasternak, Marchand line, I think that they definitely have a chance. But I just feel like
it's a big if, that one.
Yeah, it's just the Bruins just have too much experience, and Tuukka Rask has been liked out too. I feel like this will be a 6-game series, and I feel like Boston will win, but who knows? I think it will be. I think as we get into this a little bit more, I think that there will be some interesting storylines. But at this point, I feel like the Bruins will win.
To Sean's point about being the Blues' year, they are, of course, the last team from the 67 expansion that hasn't won yet. LA ticked that box a few years back. So I'm sure the league would be happy with a St. Louis victory, and I'm sure the television ratings on NBC are going to be pretty strong with those 2 markets involved.
Yeah, they are St. Louis is a really good hockey market. These are 2 good hockey markets. So I do think in the U.S. this will get some attention. And I think the other thing that I'm not trying to talk, but the NBA is kind of forefront now because of the Raptors. But I don't know, even if the Raptors win, I don't imagine that they're going to be capturing the NBA audience that much. That I think that this might be a good opportunity for the NHL to do better in the finals than people think. in terms of
Yeah, I mean, if the NBA Finals is Golden State versus Toronto, when you have Golden State, that's like, well, that's not news. I mean, they've been there so many times now recently, and then Toronto's not a U.S.-based team. I mean, the Kawhi Leonard factor there is certainly, I mean, he's capturing a lot of the people's attention just individually, but there is an opportunity for the NHL to certainly grab the spotlight at this time of year a little more than the NBA, given what the matchups could be.
Yeah, it's just, so that I think for the NHL that'll be interesting going forward. A few other things that we do want to get into here. Go ahead. We're going to say something, Sean?
No.
Oh, okay. Slava Yoynov is made the news this week. He has been basically reinstated after. It's kind of hard to explain. There's an opportunity now for him to get back in the NHL after all that has happened. So I guess the first thing is if you're an NHL team, do you foresee any NHL team taking a stab at bringing in Slava Yoynov?
Nope.
I don't see it either.
It's despite his suspension getting cut back by 41 games. So you're asking an NHL team and old school NHL guys who value the sanctity of a cohesive locker room to welcome a guy in who has had that background and those issues in mid-season. It's not happening this season. And then do you think that people are those same GMs and people are going to want to potentially bring him in for the next season when he's getting older and hasn't really played? I think he should just stay out in Russia and play out his career there if he wants to play hockey.
Yeah, for an NHL team, it's just, I mean, even just the on ice component of having him on your team, it's just such a risk with the amount of suspension he still has to serve half a season. You know, where's he at? Where's his game at? You know, like it's a big risk for teams to do that. So never mind the off ice issues, which, you know, nowadays, I mean, you know, the off ice issues do mean a lot to the credibility of your product. So I don't see it happening in any circumstance.
Yeah, and it's a PR disaster for like, I can't see even a small market NHL team, like there's been suggestions about that. I can't see anyone wanting to touch. I just think that would just be such a PR disaster at this point that I think, yeah, I don't think we see him in the NHL again. And yeah, his suspension was reduced to 41 games. So he's eligible to come back in the second half, but I can't see anybody touching that. Like, I know that there'll be some fans that will be like, hey, I think, you know, everyone deserves a second chance. All I will say to those people is look up what he did. And there's second chances that some people deserve. And this is not one of them. That's how I will say that in the most politically correct way to say that, a diplomatic way to say it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that is.
Yeah. So we'll leave that there. Phil Kessel has been in the trade talk world. He was mentioned the number one trade bait in Frank Cervelli, TSN trade bait, and there's been already a lot of talk. Oops. What's going on there? Okay. Apparently, Kessel has been offered to Arizona. He has been offered to Vegas. And apparently he's been offered to Vancouver for Besser. And Benning dropped the call somehow. I can't imagine why he would not listen to a Kessel for Besser offer. I don't understand that, in sarcasm. But where can you see Phil Kessel ending up? And what would be a reasonable acquisition for him or return for him?
Well, it's with Pittsburgh looking to make changes. I think it's just like a swap for one player for another, just to see if you could get something more out of whoever comes back. And then Kevin, just to clarify, it was Jason Zucker out of Minnesota being shot.
Yeah, I just reread that tweet. Sorry, I was like, oh wait, no, that was Jason Zucker, not Phil Kessel. Oops.
Jason Zucker's been the one that's been sort of stirring the pot in terms of Minnesota looking to make a move, and then you've got Kessel and Rutherford with the Penguins sort of doing things a little less publicly. And when you get swept out of the first round and you have the two of the best players in the NHL and in hockey, and Malkin and Crosby, I think you have to look at it and figure out how to come back the next year and make some changes and keep driving forwards, because from what I've understood from some of the insiders like Bob McKenzie and Elliot Friedman is that the Penguins don't want to rebuild. They don't want to take a step back. They want to be pushing for a cup as long as Crosby and Malkin are on the team and playing.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me. They've had so much success with Crosby, Malkin. That core, that they owe it to them to keep the team competitive for as long as possible and not enter the rebuild phase.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of who would be interested. Or who
is there a fit maybe on one of the California teams? You could see Kessel maybe wanting to go to those places. Apparently, he vetoed a trade to Minnesota.
Well, I could see San Jose maybe. To me, I mean, I think he would probably be a good fit. I guess what would you ask for in return would be the question. But I could see San Jose being a fit. I don't see Vegas being I know you're talking California, but I'm just talking in terms of contendership. I don't see Vegas being a fit. I don't see Anaheim being a fit. Maybe LA, but I guess it depends where LA thinks that they are. I know Arizona was mentioned. I would think that this would be Kessel would be more for a contender team than a rebuilding team for obvious reasons, but I don't see
San Jose and Vegas make more sense there than LA and Anaheim.
I'd also say Dallas. Dallas makes sense too, because they need some more depth scoring behind the Bennett Sagans.
What about Colorado?
That'd be an interesting one as well. He definitely can skate with the top end of Colorado. So,
2% would. I don't think he wants to play in Canada. But what about Calgary?
It'd be interesting. I don't think. A lot of it is left up to Phil Kessel. He's got no trade clause. So.
Yeah. Don't see him going to a Canadian market. I can't see that at all. He looked miserable in Toronto. I know Calgary's not the same as Toronto, but he would have zero interest in the added attention and focus that comes with playing on a Canadian team.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he would. Yeah, I can't see a Canadian team for sure, but that will be something, I guess, interesting for those that pay $230 to go to the NHL draft. Maybe they'll hear that trade. Sorry.
No, and I think he's going to want to go to a situation where he's a complementary piece, like it was in Pittsburgh. Like if he goes to a team where everybody's expecting him to be the savior. That's not going to work. That's not Phil Kessel. It didn't work in Toronto. He got run out of Boston too because he supposedly wasn't doing enough for them. So, no, he's going to want to go to a situation, I think, where he'll fit in, like on a third line or maybe a second line, and help what's already there. And Sean, your suggestion at Dallas, I think that's logical fit there. And Vegas is another one where you could plug him in and he'll help, and it's not the focus won't all be on him. Something like that I could see him being okay with. I guess he's just things have just kind of gone sour a little bit, maybe with him and the Penguins, and and they're looking to retool.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gone sour. I just think that they're looking at different ways to change things up and maybe move some salary out to help them beef up their blue line or something like that.
Yeah, they really need to beef up that blue line. I think that's one of their weaker parts of their four. I don't like. Obviously, when you have Crosby and Malkin, you're fine, but they need to build that blue line up and possibly get some depth at goaltending. Other than not that Murray's terrible, but you could improve and build some depth there for sure.
I think that's just one thing that a lot of fans need to realize is just because a player has had issues and was traded for whatever reason in the past doesn't mean that this time that they're being looked at and being traded is for that same reason. We got Phil Kessel and PK Subban and Hoffman in Florida are all three of them have had their names bandied around in terms of trade bait, and they're all for salary cap reasons more than anything else.
Yeah. It's part of just the way things go. It's not nothing. Yeah, I don't think it's anything personal to any of them. It's just that's just the reality of the situation. So, and the Edmonton Oilers, we will be didn't get a chance to connect, but the Edmonton Oilers are expected to name a new head coach. It is Dave Tippett. It was interesting. I was listening to 31 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman and this morning, and he suggested if Mark Hunter got the job, that it probably would have been DJ Smith that would have been the head coach in Edmonton, who's now the head coach in Ottawa. So if you had your druthers, who would you rather have? DJ Smith, new schoolish, or Dave Tippett, old schoolish?
I was thinking about that in terms of how Dave Tippett plays an old school sort of lock it down style, just like Ken Hitchcock tried to enforce with the Oilers this past year. I think that I would go with DJ Smith just because I think it fits where the NHL style is going. But we haven't seen Dave Tippett in a couple seasons, and maybe he with more skill, because he never really had the skill in Arizona. With more skill, he'll be able to deploy a more high tempo offensive style. But I think this is just the beginning for Edmonton in their offseason. I think there needs to be some drastic changes elsewhere for them to figure out how to fix this this quagmire of an organization.
I agree. I mean, I think a lot of changes are coming because Tippett is historically a defensive-minded coach, and it's a team built on offense. That's the simple kind of way of putting it. And I'm sure he'll be. He and McDavid and Draisaitl and the top players will get along all fine. I don't see any issues there, but they're not built to play the style of hockey that Tippett usually coaches. So we could see some pretty big moves here coming. I think for Edmonton, I mean, they're under so much pressure to not waste opportunity with McDavid and Draisaitl that hiring Tippett he's a namer. His resume is strong. It's an easy sell for people, so I can see why they'd want to go in that direction. But it is a cautionary tale nowadays to be going with the old school when the game's changing so quickly.
Yeah, it is interesting reading some Oiler perspectives that a lot of them are feeling that Dave Tippett is a perfect fit. They feel like his style will allow for McDavid and Draisaitl to be more McDavid and Draisaitl. I'll be really interested to hear what the Oilers YYC podcast has to say about this. because I don't see it. Like I don't see how that works, but there's a lot of people feeling that this is a perfect match, and I'm quite fascinated with that. I would probably lean towards if I was the Oilers, I would have leaned towards DJ Smith, but I think that there's more pressure in Edmonton than there is to Ottawa to get moving in terms of a playoff spot. So,
yeah. Well, and Tippett has a lot of experience in the Western Conference, in the Pacific Division recently too, with the Coyotes. So, I think that's an asset that they would have liked in this hiring process.
Yeah. The other thing,
he hasn't been coaching for a couple of years, so
yeah.
Maybe he's seen the way that the NHL's going, and like I said, with more skill, he might be able to deploy a more up-tempo, less defensive shell, less defensive style, and that might be what they got sold on. Because I think it's one thing to coach one way, and that's the only way you do it, but the good coaches can adapt their style to what they have, and adapt to how they coach based off of how the game's going. Mark Crawford is one that changed because of the way how much younger the players were getting, and John Tortorella is another who, when he got let go from Vancouver, him and Mike Sullivan got together and just watched how goals were scored in the NHL, and they both changed how they approached the game because of it.
Yeah. So that is going to be very interesting. It'll be an interesting match, and of course, the Oilers fans are already excited on Twitter about the possibility of having Mike Smith as a goaltender in Edmonton next year. They're like jumping up and down with glee and glory with the idea of Mike Smith and Koskinen as their goaltending tandem next year.
Well, they'll have to find some cap space they don't have right now to make that work. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if that's the case.
Yeah, I'm being sarcastic because I don't think that the Oilers fans are really excited about Smith, but they're thinking...
they need to find some other goalie than Koskinen. So in Tippett's history with Mike Smith, it would be an interesting match. So
I actually, I'll say this though. I think that Mike Smith got a little bit of a raw deal in Calgary in a lot of ways. He. If it wasn't for him, it would have been a 4-game sweep against the Avalanche for sure. And he got hurt last year. I don't think that he would be as terrible as the Oilers fans are kind of speculating. I actually think he would be better than they think. I actually don't think that would be that terrible of an idea. But
he wasn't as bad as Flames fans made him out to be.
No, absolutely not. I think Flames fans overrated Rittich and underrated Smith.
Well, and that's typical, right? I mean, when a big salary, big name struggles and the backup, shows some potential. I mean, we see that in football too. People start calling for the backup quarterback all the time, and yeah, I mean, that's just typical.
Yeah,
it's just narrow focus. It's not looking at the whole picture and saying, okay, well, actually,
yeah. All right, well, we'll leave it there. We've got some interesting stuff coming up. We are interviewing Cam Robinson next week about the NHL draft, and it's getting interesting now, especially with Capo having such a great World Championship. Who is going to be the number one pick, I think, is becoming quite fascinating at this point. So I'm really looking forward to that. Coming up, we are interviewing him next week. And what else do we have going on?
Then that's the only concrete thing we've got going on right now. But we are sort of on the groundworks of working with other podcasts and working to get some more interviews.
Yes. We do. I know that there is a couple of. I do know we do have a couple of other things. What I'll say is we have a couple of other things that are happening. I just can't say yet because we haven't nailed down a schedule. So once we know what their schedule is, we'll announce it. That's fair to say. But yeah, looking forward to talking to Cam Robinson about this is going to be a fascinating NHL draft, I think, especially at the top. So looking forward to that. So that will be next week. How do we follow you guys again?
I am BeardyCanucks03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
All right. And, of course, I'm at KVOLE. And we will talk to you all next week. Just keep an eye out, too, because we may not be recording on Saturday, but keep an eye out for that. But we'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.